Elijah Monroe had it all: towering skyscrapers with his name on them, sleek cars parked in rows like trophies, and private jets on standby. Whenever he entered a room, people stood. When he spoke, they clapped. His phone buzzed constantly. He was richer than most could imagine. As the heir to Monroe Holdings, Elijah was a force the business world both feared and worshipped. But inside, Elijah was exhausted. He was tired of fake smiles, tired of women who loved his wealth, not his heart. The world praised him as brilliant, powerful, even untouchable. Yet his nights were hollow. Every evening ended in silence. He lived alone, in a mansion so vast, there were rooms he'd never stepped into. The lights were bright, but his spirit felt dim. His bed was soft, but sleep never came easily. Lying awake, staring at the ceiling, he asked the same question each night. Does anyone love me for me? He had dated models, lawyers, influencers, all gorgeous, all charming. They laughed at his jokes even when they weren't funny, smiled at his presence, but he always knew deep down they loved the billionaire, not Elijah. Then came Naomi Rivera, or so he thought. She was smart, warm, witty. She didn't seem fazed by his status. Elijah fell hard. He gave her his heart, bought her a ring, dreamed of a future. But one morning, arriving at Monroe Holdings earlier than usual, he walked into his executive office and saw her laughing and kissing his CFO. He didn't say a word, just turned around and walked out. That day, something broke inside him. He canceled the wedding, fired the CFO, and locked himself away in the Monroe estate for days. No one saw him, not even his assistant, Camilla Hart. People assumed he'd jetted, off to Europe, but Elijah stayed put, pacing his halls, hurt and haunted. Was I not enough for her? If I had nothing, would anyone even choose me? That night, as thunder rattled the glass and rain splashed against the windows, Elijah stood silently by the pane, his eyes fixed on the darkness outside. He whispered to no one but himself, I'm going to find out. He turned and picked up his phone. Camilla, he said when she answered, get me an old shirt, torn trousers, slippers. Sir? She asked, confused. No designers, no watches, no car. I want to look like a man with nothing. There was a pause. Then Camilla said softly, Yes, sir. Elijah Monroe, billionaire CEO of Monroe Holdings, had made up his mind. He wasn't going undercover for fun. He wasn't doing this as a game. He needed to know, could anyone love a man who had lost it all? But he wouldn't rush it. If he suddenly appeared as a street beggar, someone might recognize him. So he took his time. Step by step, he vanished from the man the world knew. He stopped shaving. His beard grew wild and thick. He stopped wearing suits. Traded his wardrobe for old t-shirts, ragged jeans, and sandals. No watches, no luxury cars, no meetings with elite investors, no bodyguards trailing behind. He packed a small bag and slipped out of the Monroe estate before sunrise. The housekeepers thought he'd traveled. No one knew where he was, not even his parents, who were away, in Geneva finalizing a deal. That made it easier. Elijah found a tiny room in a neglected district on the outskirts of the city. The walls were cracked. The window had no curtain. The mattress reeked of old dust and sweat. But he didn't complain. He wanted to live as a man with nothing. Every day, Elijah Monroe walked the streets of East Crest, a forgotten corner of the city where dreams moved slow and hunger moved fast. He did odd jobs, pushing wheelbarrows in the market, carrying wood for carpenters, washing dusty cars parked by the roadside. He got paid in wrinkled bills, cash he folded neatly into his pocket like they were diamonds. For the first time in years, Elijah felt invisible, and strangely, it felt good. No one called him sir. No one followed him with flashing cameras. No one smiled fake smiles to impress him. At night, he sat on the edge of his worn bed, staring at the torn calendar on the wall, thinking. No servants, no meetings, no headlines, just silence, just him. He only spoke when necessary. He nodded at people who passed, Some nodded back. Most ignored him, and no one recognized him. Even in his old life, Elijah had hated the spotlight. Now that preference worked in his favor. Meanwhile, back at Monroe Holdings, Camilla Hart was working quietly behind the scenes. She didn't fully understand Elijah's plan, but she trusted him. She started arranging blind dates through elite dating apps. But each woman was told the same story. You're meeting a man who once had a good life. But the economy hit him hard. He lost everything. He's rebuilding. He works manual jobs now. No cars, no house, no title. None of them knew he was Elijah Monroe, CEO and heir to Monroe Holdings, the billionaire son of Richard and Celeste Monroe. Camilla also arranged another detail: discreet security. Elijah was watched from a distance by 2 bodyguards, no suits, no earpieces, just 2 trained eyes blending into street life, keeping him safe just in case. But Elijah didn't want safety. He wanted the truth. Could anyone care for a man who had lost everything? The first date happened on a Thursday evening. Elijah arrived early at a roadside eatery called Mama B's, a modest stall famous for spicy jollof rice and grilled suya. He wore a faded checkered shirt, ripped jeans, and slippers still caked in market dust. His beard was thick, his hair uncombed. The sky above turned orange, painting the street in warm tones. Then she came. Her name was Maya Dean, a fashion influencer with over 100,000 followers. She walked in wearing a neon pink dress, heels that clicked with drama, and glittery nails that sparkled under the evening sun. She looked once at Elijah, frowned, then scanned the place again, like hoping the real date was hiding in a corner. "You're the one?" she asked flatly. Elijah smiled. "Yes. Thank you for coming." Maya sat down slowly, already disgusted. "You actually invited me here?" Here?" she asked, pulling out her phone. "It's quiet," Elijah replied calmly, "and I like the food." Maya let out a loud laugh. "I can't do this," she said, already rising to her feet. "Next time try dressing like a human being, not like someone dragged from the gutter." She was gone before the waitress even brought water. Elijah sat there quietly, then paid the bill, hers included, and walked home in the dark. The second date followed 2 days later. Vanessa Klein, a lawyer. Sharp, confident, direct. They met at a roadside joint where pepper soup simmered in stainless steel bowls. She arrived with a notebook in hand and questions in her eyes. "You said you work manual jobs?" she asked. No smile in sight. "Yes." "Daily pay or weekly?" "Depends on the job," Elijah answered. "What kind of home do you live in?" "Shared apartment, just a room." "Ever been married? How many siblings? Where do your parents live? What did you study?" She kept writing, not eating. Elijah answered every question, careful to maintain the story. But inside he knew. She wasn't trying to know him, she was calculating, running numbers in her head, weighing his value. When the soup came, she stood up, snapped her notebook shut. "I'll call you." She never did. The third one nearly tricked him. Her name was Leah Otis. She was gentle, warm. She smiled often, listened well, said she loved humble men and respected hard work. They talked for hours. She told stories about growing up poor, said she understood what it meant to struggle. Elijah let his guard down a little. Maybe this one is different. That night, he walked her home. She held his hand. Her eyes held something like affection. The next morning, she texted, "Hey love, I didn't want to ask, but I'm in a tight spot. My rent just expired and I've got nothing to eat. Even small help would mean the world. I really believe in us." Elijah stared at the screen. Not even 24 hours had passed. Another woman asking for something. Not because of love, but because of what she hoped he had. That night Elijah sat outside his cramped room under the moonlight, listening to dogs bark in the distance. He didn't speak. Didn't move. His heart felt sore, disappointed. Maybe real love didn't exist anymore. Maybe nobody saw the man. Only the name. Maybe that's all he'd ever be to them. Elijah Monroe woke up one morning and sat motionless on the edge of his small bed. The ceiling fan spun slowly above his head, doing little to chase away the heat. Sweat clung to his back. His clothes stuck to his skin. But what weighed him down the most was not the humidity. It was disappointment. He had tried. He had walked through dust, worn the disguise, spoken gently, eaten from broken plates in tin stalls, and smiled when he didn't feel like smiling. He had met 3 women, and all 3 had looked at him like he was a possibility and not a person, a lottery ticket, not a partner. He picked up his old phone and dialed. Camilla answered on the second ring. "Sir?" "I'm done, Elijah," said voice flat. There was a pause on her end. "What do you mean?" "I've walked miles in this heat, sat in broken chairs, eaten food that tasted like regret, and still, nothing. Every single one of them saw me either as a burden or a wallet." His voice cracked with frustration. "They don't want me. They want what I might be hiding." Camilla didn't interrupt. She knew better. "I'm just a target now," Elijah added. "I've become a ghost of wealth they can't see, but they're hoping to chase." He was ready to give up, to go back to the Monroe estate, back to the clean sheets, the glossy boardrooms, and the rooms filled with empty praise. But Camilla's voice broke the silence. Soft, steady. "Elijah, there are good people in the world. I married one of them." Elijah blinked. "You never told me you were married." Camilla gave a small chuckle. "We met when we were both broke. Nothing but bills and borrowed hope. And now, 10 years later, we still don't have much, but we have everything that matters." He didn't respond. Camilla continued. "Don't let 3 bad women make you blind to the one good one." He scoffed. "You really think someone can love a man who has absolutely nothing?" "I do," she replied gently. "But only if that man becomes nothing for real." Elijah's eyes narrowed. He stood slowly, the gears in his mind clicking into place. "Fine," he said. "What do you mean?" Camilla asked, suddenly cautious. "I'll take it all the way," he whispered. "This time, no job, no income, no story of rebuilding. I want to see if anyone in this world can love a man who looks like he's lost everything." A long silence followed. Then Camilla whispered, "Okay, I'll help." The next morning, Camilla arrived at his hideout, a rundown flat in East Crest, with a duffel bag. Inside, 2 tattered shirts, a threadbare hoodie, worn-out trousers, and a pair of rubber sandals that looked like they'd walked through history. She also handed him a faded brown sack, the kind used to carry garbage. Elijah changed silently. When he looked in the cracked mirror, even he didn't recognize the man staring back. Camilla reached out and gently adjusted his hoodie. "Don't talk much, just sit, watch, listen." Elijah nodded. Then he pulled open a small metal box from under his mattress. Inside, folded carefully, was a check. Signed amount, $5 million. "I'll give this," he said softly, "to the first woman who shows me real kindness. Not because I beg, but because she chooses to care." Camilla swallowed hard. "Good luck." He slipped the check into the inside lining of his hoodie, picked up the sack, and walked out. And so, the real test began. Elijah sat near market gates, at busy bus stops, on cement blocks beside tailors and under rusted zinc shades. He didn't beg. He didn't speak unless spoken to. He just sat, dusty, quiet, waiting. People passed. Some glanced at him with pity. Some laughed. A few dropped coins. Most walked by like he was part of the street, a stone, a shadow, a smell. He changed locations daily. Sometimes he waited by the fish market. Other days he lingered by a bus station, his sack beside him, his hoodie drawn low. The world rushed past, and Elijah stayed still, watching, hoping. He met many people. Some whispered cruel things. One girl named Tochi stopped and said sweetly, "You look like you've been through so much, poor thing." Elijah looked up, grateful. Please, he said gently. Just some water or bread? Her smile vanished. You want to eat? She asked, then burst into laughter. She walked away, already dialing her friend. Guess what? Some smelly beggar just asked me for food. Can you believe that? Another woman, Kendra, sat beside him briefly. She took selfies with him, even made him smile for one. Then she uploaded the pictures with the caption, "Helping the less fortunate is a vibe. Blessed, Karka Goodheart." She walked away without offering food, water, or even a goodbye. Elijah stayed frozen on the curb, heart hollowing out. His fingers dug into the sack beside him like it could hold his dignity. He started to wonder. Maybe Camilla was wrong. Maybe kindness was extinct. Maybe people had changed forever. But then, on the fifth evening, the clouds darkened. Rain fell sharp and cold, slashing the ground like glass. Elijah sat near an old tailor's kiosk, the sign barely hanging. Water dripped through the gaps in the zinc roof, and then she came. The rain came hard that evening, slicing through the city in sheets of cold. Street vendors packed up early. Commuters ducked under awnings. Buses sprayed puddles as they sped by. Elijah Monroe sat under the broken shade of an old tailor's shop in Crescent Market District. His hoodie was soaked. His sack of clothes sat limp beside him. His back was wet. His bones ached. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just waited. He had been out in the storm for hours, watching the world ignore him. A few people dropped coins. A couple tossed pitying glances his way. One woman threw him a stale piece of bread like tossing scraps to a stray dog. The city had moved on. He was just another forgotten soul on a broken curb. Then she came. She ran across the flooded road, with one hand gripping a bright green umbrella, the other carrying a nylon bag pressed to her chest. Her blouse, a lilac shade that stood out in the gray, clung to her skin from the damp. She wore plastic slippers and had her hair tied up in a patterned scarf. She slowed down when she saw him. Elijah glanced up, expecting her to keep walking. But she didn't. She stopped. "You're getting drenched," she said gently, her eyes full of concern, not disgust. He didn't respond. The words caught in his throat. Without hesitation, she opened the nylon bag and brought out a steaming plastic container. She didn't say much, just extended it with both hands. "It's rice and beans," she said softly. "I cooked it for myself, but please, eat. You look hungry." Elijah took it slowly, his hands trembling from the cold. Before he could thank her, she did something he hadn't seen in weeks. She untied her wrapper, the dry one around her waist, and placed it gently over his shoulders. "You'll catch a fever like this," she murmured. He was stunned, frozen by the quiet grace in her actions. "Thank you," he finally whispered. She smiled, a real smile. "I'm Naomi Bennett," she said. "I sew clothes here, and I teach at a nursery school nearby." "I'm Elijah," he replied, "just trying to survive." "Well, life's not easy for most of us these days," she said with a shrug. She didn't ask for anything in return. She didn't take a selfie. She didn't offer advice. She didn't drop coins like pity. She just gave warmth, food, and kindness. A few minutes later, as the rain grew heavier, Naomi looked at him again and said, "If you want, you can stay by my shop till the rain passes. I'll be there sewing anyway." Elijah blinked. He hadn't heard kindness in weeks. "No one's spoken to me this kindly in a long time," he said softly. Naomi's smile deepened. "Then maybe it's about time someone did." They walked together under her umbrella, sidestepping puddles until they reached her small shop tucked between a fruit stall and a salon. The place smelled of fabric, starch, and lemon soap. A sewing machine sat in the corner. Rolls of cloth leaned against the wall. A small bulb dangled from a wire above the workbench. Elijah sat on a stool near the door, his clothes dripping slowly. Naomi set her bag down, lit a small burner, and boiled water. She handed him a cup. Drink. It'll help. The warmth seeped into his chest. But it wasn't the tea. It was her presence, her calm, her way of seeing someone that everyone else had chosen to look through. They sat in silence for a while. Then Elijah spoke. "I don't have a home." Naomi looked at him, surprised but not shaken. She didn't look down on him, didn't flinch. She simply nodded. "Well, if you don't mind, you can sleep here," she said, glancing around her little shop. "It's not much, but it's dry and safe." Elijah blinked. "You'd let me stay?" She laughed gently. "Why not? My house is just around the corner. I come here every evening after school anyway. Tomorrow I'll bring you breakfast too." Elijah said nothing. His throat tightened. Something warm stirred in his chest. Not from the tea, not from the dry wrapper, but from her, Naomi. He looked around again, at the sewing tools, the faded measuring tape, the spools of colored thread, and whispered, "I can help you, you know, with errands, deliveries. I don't know how to sew, but I can learn." Naomi laughed for real this time. "If you can carry fabric and fold wrappers, you're hired." And so it began. Days passed in the soft rhythm of thread and dust. Elijah Monroe worked quietly in Naomi Bennett's small sewing shop in Crescent Market District. He swept floors, cut fabric, carried customer parcels, and folded wrappers with care. In the evenings, when Naomi returned from Horizon Nursery Academy, she'd change into her sewing gown, pull her hair back, and get to work, stitching until her hands were sore and her shoulders ached. Elijah watched her, watched the way she smiled through fatigue, the way she measured fabric twice just to be sure, the way she treated each customer, rich or poor, with the same soft-spoken respect. She was not just kind, she was grace and fire stitched into one soul. A woman who taught children all day, then ran her own business every night. He found peace in that little shop. Peace he hadn't known in boardrooms or business jets. And one evening, as they folded headscarves and laughed at a crooked zipper, on a finished gown, Elijah said with a smile, "You know, I'm actually a billionaire." Naomi didn't look up. She chuckled and kept folding. "Well, whether rich or poor, a kind man is still a treasure." Elijah's smile grew. He reached into his hoodie and slowly took out the folded check, the same one he had carried close to his heart for weeks. He laid it on the table beside the scissors. Naomi glanced at it, then raised an eyebrow. "$5 million?" she said aloud. She picked it up, turned it in her hand, then looked at him, amused. "You're funny," she said, laughing again. She folded the check and handed it back. "You must be practicing stand-up comedy on the side." Elijah didn't say a word, because she didn't blink, didn't ask if it was real, didn't ask for any of it. No hunger, no hint of greed, just Naomi, kind and constant. A few nights later, as they sat outside the shop eating roasted yams dipped in groundnut oil, Elijah noticed she was quieter than usual. "You okay?" he asked gently. She nodded, her fingers toying with the hem of her wrapper. "Just thinking about my family." He waited. "My mom's turning 50 this weekend," she said. "There's going to be a celebration at home, in Willow Glen." She paused again, then gave a small, almost shy smile. "She's been asking me to bring someone home. You know, a man, a fiancé." Elijah smiled lightly. "I know that pressure." Naomi looked at him, her eyes glimmering with something unspoken. "Would you come with me?" she asked softly. Elijah blinked. "Me?" She nodded. "I know it's silly, but I'd rather show up with someone I trust than lie again or get mocked." He looked down at himself, still in worn-out slippers, his hoodie frayed, his beard slightly trimmed but still wild. "You want me to pretend to be your fiancé?" he asked slowly. Naomi's voice stayed calm. "Yes, if you're okay with it, just for the day." He stared at her. She wasn't joking. She wasn't ashamed. She wanted him. Not a role, not a resume, not a costume. Him, as he was. He smiled, heart quietly pounding. I'd be honored. They left for Willow Glen early Saturday morning. Naomi packed light, a dress for the event, 2 changes of clothes, and a travel bag with her sewing kit, just in case. Elijah trimmed his beard, just enough to look tidy. He wore a plain button-down shirt and dark trousers, clean, respectful, nothing flashy, nothing branded, just simple and quiet. As they approached her family's compound, the sounds of music and laughter spilled into the air. Pots of jollof rice steamed over open fires. Women fanned grills filled with sizzling meat. Plastic chairs were scattered across the yard. They had barely stepped through the gate when Naomi's elder sister spotted them, Felicia Bennett. She wore a sharp green dress, gold bangles that jingled with every step, and the unmistakable air of superiority. Felicia was a branch manager at a big bank in the city, and she made sure everyone knew it. She walked over with a tight smile, then gave Elijah a look, a full top-to-bottom scan. "This is him?" she asked, folding her arms. "Naomi, this is your fiancé?" Naomi smiled warmly and linked her arm with Elijah's. "Yes, Felicia." "Meet Elijah." Felicia didn't return the smile. "Couldn't you find someone more polished? Or at least someone who doesn't look like he borrowed his outfit from a bus conductor?" Elijah simply nodded. "Nice to meet you." She scoffed and walked away. Naomi whispered, "I'm sorry about her." Elijah smiled. "I've heard worse." Later that afternoon, the entire family sat around long tables laughing and eating. Just as the drinks began to flow and the plates clinked together, a tall man stepped into the yard. Marcus Cole, Naomi's ex. He was loud, confident, flashy, wore a designer shirt stamped with Monroe Holdings logo, the very company Elijah owned. But Marcus walked like he ran the place. He greeted everyone, then walked straight up to Naomi, hugging her longer than necessary. "I heard you're engaged," Marcus said, turning to Elijah. "This him?" Naomi nodded. "Yes. This is Elijah. And what are you doing here?" Marcus grinned, his voice louder than necessary. "Your mom invited me. I guess I'm still family." He looked Elijah up and down. "Wow. You really went from SUV to bicycle, huh?" A few relatives laughed nervously. Elijah didn't respond. He just looked at Naomi. But she wasn't having it. She leaned forward. "I would choose Elijah over you 100 times, she said loud and clear. "Because unlike you, he respects me. And he doesn't cheat on me with his assistant, then blame it on stress." Marcus's face froze. Before he could react, Naomi's mother stepped in. She cleared her throat and looked at Elijah. "So, what do you do for a living?" she asked, voice stern. Elijah smiled calmly. "Just odd jobs. A little of this and that." Naomi's mother raised an eyebrow. "So no stable job? No car? No land? How exactly do you plan to take care of my daughter?" "Mom," Naomi interrupted. "I'm happy. Isn't that what matters?" Her mother's eyes narrowed at Elijah. "Are you manipulating her, using kind words to hide the fact that you have nothing to offer?" Elijah stayed calm. He didn't raise his voice, didn't explain himself. He simply folded his napkin and looked down. That night, when the guests had left and silence returned, Elijah stepped outside the house and made one quiet phone call. 4 words. "Camilla, send it tomorrow." The next morning, the sun rose over Willow Glen, casting a soft golden hue across the family compound. The scent of leftover jollof rice and grilled meat still lingered in the air as everyone gathered for breakfast. Plates clinked, laughter flowed, stories from the night before bounced between relatives. Naomi and Elijah sat quietly near the edge of the yard, away from the louder voices. Naomi's hand gently rested on Elijah's knee, a silent comfort after a long evening of silent judgment. Then a low, powerful sound rolled through the compound. Vroom. Heads turned. The deep hum of a luxury SUV engine echoed down the dusty road. Then another, and a third. 3 sleek black vehicles rolled into the compound, windows tinted, bodies spotless. The crowd went silent. From the lead car, a man in a black suit stepped out. No words, no theatrics. Just calm authority. He held a red envelope in a small velvet box. "Who is the mother of Miss Naomi Bennett?" he asked in a neutral voice. Naomi's mother, confused, stepped forward. He handed her the envelope and box. "Your daughter's fiancé instructed me to deliver this." Gasps. Whispers. Someone near the back muttered, "Wait, what's going on?" Naomi's mother opened the envelope. Inside, keys to a brand new luxury SUV, fully paid for and registered in her name. More gasps. The crowd buzzed. "What? Are you serious?" someone asked. "Is this for real?" Before Elijah could utter a word, Marcus Cole stepped forward, his chest puffed with pride. "Come on now," he said loudly, placing his hand dramatically over his heart. "You know I had to do something special for the woman who raised my first love." All eyes turned to him. "You bought all this?" someone asked. Marcus winked. "Supervisor at Monroe Holdings, remember? Life's changed." Applause erupted. Naomi's uncles clinked their glasses. Her sister Felicia rushed forward and hugged Marcus. "Wow, you're too much," she beamed. "Naomi, now this is how you know a real man." Elijah stood beside Naomi, silent. Still. He watched. He didn't correct them. Didn't say it was his gift. He just observed. The cheers, the miscredit, the lies. Later that week, back in the city, Naomi invited Elijah to a housewarming party. Her old university classmate Chantel Myers had bought a new flat and was throwing a celebration for her friends. The apartment was modern, with glass light fixtures, marble floors, and a television as wide as a wall. The air smelled of imported perfumes. Laughter bounced off white furniture. The women wore red lipstick and silver heels. The men compared foreign job offers and luxury watches. Naomi arrived in a plain gown and flat shoes. Elijah wore his usual clothes. Neat, quiet, nothing flashy. They barely stepped into the living room when the whispers began. "Is that Naomi? She used to be the best graduating student. What happened? Guess brains don't always lead to success." Someone snickered, still dressing like a school teacher. Another voice. "Who's the guy? He looks like he just fixed the generator downstairs." Chantel greeted them with a plastic smile. "Naomi, long time." Then she turned to Elijah. "And this is," Naomi answered proudly. "This is Elijah, my fiancé." Chantel blinked. "And what do you do?" she asked, sipping wine. Elijah smiled. "Just trying to make my way." "No company? No startup?" "Nope," someone murmured. "He was asking for directions at the bus stop last week. Are we sure he's not a street guy?" A man nearby pointed at Elijah's shoes. "Did you get those from the flea market?" Laughter rippled through the room. Elijah's smile didn't fade. He stayed composed, but Naomi had heard enough. Before Chantel could say another word, she raised her voice just slightly, just enough for the room to hear. "Sorry," she said, "but I think we should leave." Chantel blinked, surprised. "Wait, what?" Naomi stood tall. "You may have polished floors and golden lights," she said calmly. "But if this is what you call class, I want no part of it." The room quieted. Naomi looked around slowly. "Don't look down on people just because you think you're better. You don't know anyone's story." Then she turned to Elijah, linked her arm with his, and whispered, "Let's go." They walked out, heads high, hearts heavy. But together, as they reached the compound gate, taunt still echoing behind them, something happened. Horn blasts, flashing lights, engines. The ground trembled faintly. Everyone froze. The estate gate slid open again, and into the courtyard rolled 3 black SUVs identical to the ones from Willow Glen. Behind them, 2 more sedans, sleek, tinted, polished. Music stopped. Even the DJ stared. From the first SUV, a man in a dark suit stepped out and scanned the crowd, calm, silent, professional. Then he opened the second door. Camilla Hart stepped out, dressed in elegant black, clipboard in hand. She walked toward Elijah. "Sir," she said with a respectful nod, "everything is in place." Gasps rippled through the guests. "Sir?" Did she just call him sir? More security exited the cars. Phones came out. Cameras rolled. Someone whispered, "I think this is a movie shoot." Another guest stared. "Wait, that guy, I've seen him somewhere." Naomi's hand trembled. Elijah turned to her gently, eyes full of quiet truth. Then he let go of her hand, took 2 steps forward, and reached into his back pocket. From it, he pulled a folded red file. He opened it and raised his voice. Not angry, just steady and clear. "My name is Elijah Monroe." The air went silent. "I'm the CEO of Monroe Holdings, and the only son of Richard and Celeste Monroe." He held up the documents, identity papers, company shares, news clippings. Phones lit up, fingers tapped screens, searching. Photos appeared instantly. Elijah, at global summits, shaking hands with presidents, winning awards. Chantel's mouth hung open. One girl dropped her wine glass. The man who mocked Elijah's shoes sat down, face pale. A teenage boy whispered, "This is going viral." Hashtags began to trend instantly. Beggar turned billionaire. Monroe revealed from dust to diamonds. Elijah turned back to Naomi, his voice softened. "I came to you with nothing. No name, no suit, no car, just a tired heart and empty hands." Naomi stood frozen, tears shimmering in her eyes. "And you gave me food when you had little, shelter when I had nowhere, kindness when the world offered only judgment." He dropped to one knee and opened a small velvet box. A diamond ring glowed under the courtyard lights. "Naomi Bennett," he said, voice shaking slightly. "You are a rare gem, and I want to spend the rest of my life thanking God for letting me find you." "Will you marry me?" Naomi covered her mouth. Tears spilled freely now. She nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Elijah." The courtyard exploded into cheers, half awkward, half overwhelmed. Some clapped, some cried, some stood in stunned silence. Chantel stumbled forward, cheeks flushed. "Elijah, I'm so sorry. We didn't know." He looked at her calmly. "You judged the packaging," he said, "not the person." Then he turned back to Naomi, took her hand and never looked away, and together they walked out, not as beggar and schoolteacher, but as soulmates, seen by the world, but defined by their own hearts. 2 days after the dramatic reveal at Chantel's housewarming party, the media storm had only just begun. Social feeds were flooded. Headlines spread like wildfire. CEO of Monroe Holdings reveals true identity in viral house party proposal. Elijah Monroe was disguised as a beggar, engaged to a seamstress schoolteacher. From kindness to crown, the woman who stole a billionaire's heart. But Elijah didn't care about headlines. He had one thing on his mind, making it official. That morning, Monroe Holdings called a press conference. But this time it wasn't about a merger or an international partnership. There were no business analysts, no investment updates. This was personal. The press room filled up quickly. Reporters whispered, cameras clicked, microphones pointed forward. Then, Elijah walked in. He wore a dark blue tailored suit, clean-cut, collected, and confident. Camilla Hart stood behind him, quiet and proud. He stepped up to the podium. "I have a personal announcement to make today," he began, his voice strong but steady. "One that means more to me than any business deal, contract, or market gain." Cameras flashed. He smiled, eyes softening. "I want to introduce the woman who changed my life, not with money or fame, but with a plate of food, a dry wrapper, and the kindest heart I've ever known." He paused. "Her name is Naomi Bennett, and she is my fiancée." Gasps filled the room. Screens lit up across the country. The press didn't need to ask questions. The moment said it all. The love story that had already taken over the internet was now real, confirmed, and shining brighter than any corporate success. Back in Willow Glen, Naomi's family watched the press conference on a neighbor's TV. Phones rang. Group chats exploded. Her mother sat quietly in the living room, phone shaking in her hand. Naomi's sister, Felicia, was in the kitchen. She sat down slowly and covered her face, tears falling in silence. The same man they had mocked, dismissed, and insulted had just turned the world upside down, and he had done it with humility. Her mother finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. He chose her. With the whole world watching, he chose her. Then the phone rang again. This time it wasn't just friends, it was extended family, uncles, aunts, cousins, all asking the same question. Can we speak to Naomi? Back in the city, Elijah had another surprise waiting. He took Naomi to a beautiful estate just outside downtown. White walls, golden lighting, a lush garden with fresh jasmine and roses. He opened the gate with his own key. This, he said, is yours. Naomi's mouth fell open. You bought me a house? He smiled and nodded. And this, he said, holding up a sleek silver car key, is your new car. But he wasn't done. He handed her a thick envelope. She opened it carefully. Documents, inside stamped and notarized, 100 million naira, transferred into her name, for her business, for her dreams. She stared at it, then slowly handed it back. Elijah blinked. Naomi? I didn't help you because I wanted anything. She said gently. I helped you because it was right. I can't take this. He stared at her, stunned. In a world where everyone had wanted more, she wanted nothing. Camilla, standing nearby, let out a quiet laugh and whispered, I told you so. Elijah's heart overflowed. He reached for Naomi's hand, smiling. I'm never letting you go, he said. Later that week, Elijah's parents returned from a 3-week international trip. They stepped into the massive living room of the Monroe estate, unaware of the storm waiting inside. A few minutes after they arrived, Camilla entered with a calm knock. Your son is finally engaged, she said softly. I believe you've seen the news. Celeste Monroe, Elijah's mother, froze mid-step. Engaged? She repeated. Then her eyes narrowed. To that nobody? Richard Monroe said nothing. He never spoke before thinking. She's a school teacher, Celeste continued. A seamstress. She's not from our world, Camilla. Camilla kept her tone even. People are saying your son found love. That's all. Celeste's eyes flashed. She will embarrass us at international events. What will investors think? What will world leaders say? But Camilla didn't blink. They'll say your son is human, and that he followed his heart. Celeste turned away, disgusted. This isn't over. The next morning, Elijah sat across from his parents in the glass-walled parlor of Monroe Estate. Sunlight poured in through tall windows, but the tension in the air was cold. His mother sat upright, legs crossed, fingers tapping her armrest. His father remained quiet, the ever-observing diplomat. I'm happy you're back, Elijah said softly. There's something I want to share. We already know, his mother cut in. She picked up a tablet and placed it on the coffee table. On the screen, Naomi's smiling face, holding Elijah's hand. She's sweet, Celeste said, tightly. But this can't work. Elijah looked her straight in the eyes. She's kind, hardworking, honest. What more could I want? You need someone who fits our world, she said coldly. Someone who understands power, diplomacy, image. She understands me, Elijah replied. Celeste stood and walked to the window. The Senate president's daughter, Alessia Grantham, is still single. Her father is offering a highway contract, billions, generational wealth. We're not poor, Elijah said gently. We already have more than we'll ever spend. His mother turned sharply. And yet you want to throw it all away for a girl who makes dresses in a wooden stall? She gave me back something I didn't know I'd lost. Peace. She made me believe in love again. Celeste's voice sharpened. You're the heir. The Monroe name must remain respected. I've made my choice, Elijah said, rising. I'd rather lose everything than lose Naomi. Silence. Then Celeste lifted a leather folder and slammed it on the table. From this moment, if you don't agree to marry Alessia, you lose your inheritance, your board seat, your company shares, everything. Elijah's hands clenched. I've built enough of my own, he said quietly. I'm not afraid to start again. The silence that followed was thick and cold, and just like that, the war between love and legacy began. Elijah walked out of the Monroe estate that evening, no longer just the heir of a powerful family, but a man who had chosen to be free. That night, after leaving the Monroe estate, Elijah sat beside Naomi in her small living room in Crescent Market. A single bulb flickered overhead, casting soft shadows on the faded walls. The ceiling fan creaked every few seconds. The silence between them was heavy but not angry, just aching. Naomi looked at him, her heart already torn. You don't have to say it, she whispered. Elijah turned his eyes toward her. I know what your parents said, she continued, trying to keep her voice steady. I don't care what they said, Elijah replied without hesitation. But Elijah, she said, swallowing hard, you've worked your entire life for that company. You've built Monroe Holdings since you were 20. It's your name, your blood. He reached out and took her hand gently. You're worth more than all of it. Naomi's eyes welled up. I feel like I'm pulling you out of your world. You're giving me a new one, he said softly. A better one. But deep inside, Naomi was hurting. She saw how hard he had fought for her. She saw the headlines, the pressure, the investors walking away. She read the tabloids that labeled her a charity case, the billionaire's risk, an unqualified future CEO's wife. And she didn't want to be the reason he lost everything he had worked for. The next morning, Elijah woke to find her gone. Her sewing machine was untouched. Her table cleared. Only a single piece of paper sat folded on the table, written in her neat, careful handwriting. I love you with all my heart, but I'd rather see you succeed than be the reason you lose everything. Naomi Elijah stood still, the note trembling in his hand. He had been prepared to lose billions. He wasn't prepared to lose her. Days passed. He searched everywhere, called every number, visited every district, reached out to everyone she'd ever worked with. Nothing. He returned to her shop each night, hoping the light would be on. But it never was. Where are you, Naomi? He whispered into the dark. Without her, even freedom felt like a cage. Meanwhile, miles away in a quiet town, outside the city, Naomi had found shelter with an old friend. She had taken a teaching job at a small community school and volunteered part-time at a local clinic. She had stopped answering calls, stopped reading the news. Every day she whispered to herself, it's better this way. He deserves to soar without worrying about me. But one afternoon, she sat on the edge of her bed staring at something small in her hand. A white test strip. 2 pink lines. She stared at them over and over. She was pregnant. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Not from fear, but from the crushing weight of love and uncertainty. I'll raise you alone, she whispered, her hand resting gently on her stomach. You're not alone, okay? Mommy's here. Some nights she held her pillow and cried, not because she regretted her decision, but because she missed him, the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the world. The way he stood by her in a world that told him not to. Back in the city, Elijah was restless. His company was in limbo. The media wanted updates. His parents avoided his calls. But none of it mattered. All he wanted was Naomi. He stood in front of her old shop again one evening. His hand touched the metal shutter. Still locked, still silent. Please come back, he whispered, eyes closed. Far away, Destiny stirred. Celeste Monroe, Elijah's mother, had traveled to a quiet town for a charity event, hoping to escape the media frenzy after her son walked away from Monroe Holdings. She kept her head down, avoiding photographers and donors. But as she passed a local clinic, she saw a familiar figure outside. Thin, tired, but glowing. Naomi. She was carrying a bag of baby clothes and helping an elderly woman through the clinic doors. Celeste froze. She watched silently from the car window. She saw Naomi smile softly, place her hand on the woman's shoulder, wipe her tears. Then Celeste noticed something else, a small bump beneath Naomi's loose dress, barely noticeable, but unmistakable. She leaned toward the driver. "Do you know that young woman?" she asked. The nurse standing nearby nodded. "That's Miss Naomi. She teaches the kids at our community school, sweet girl, and she's expecting." Celeste Monroe sat back in her seat, silent, still. The girl she had once called unworthy was now carrying her grandchild, and doing it with humility, grace, and no expectation of anything in return. That night, back at the Monroe estate, Celeste sat alone with a cup of tea. It had gone cold. Her husband entered the room as usual, reading financial reports. "I saw her today," she said softly. Richard looked up. "Who?" "Naomi," his brow furrowed. "She's pregnant," Celeste continued, voice tight. "She's living in a tiny room, teaching at a small school, helping at a clinic, still standing tall." He said nothing. "She's carrying our grandchild," she said, with a small, disbelieving laugh. "And I judged her. All this time I judged her for not being born into our world." She looked at him, eyes wet. "But she has something we can't buy." She placed a hand over her heart. "Strength, loyalty, soul." For the first time, Richard Monroe's face changed. He closed the folder slowly. "She's the right one for our son," he said quietly. Celeste nodded. "I see that now." That same evening, just after sunset, Elijah Monroe was pacing the floor of his quiet penthouse apartment. The city glittered beyond the glass walls, but none of it mattered. His hands were in his pockets. His thoughts were in the past. In her smile, in her hands, in her voice whispering, "I'd rather see you succeed." Then the phone rang. He grabbed it instantly. It was Camilla. "I found her," she said softly. Elijah froze. "Where?" Camilla gave him the address. A quiet neighborhood on the edge of town. A small health clinic, a nursery school, a rented room above a tailor shop. "She didn't disappear," Camilla added. "She just started over." Elijah didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He was already grabbing his keys. That night, under a cloudy sky, Elijah drove himself through winding roads until he reached the modest street Camilla had described. The headlights of his car cut across old buildings, potholes, and shuttered stalls. He stepped out quietly. No security. No entourage. No title. Just Elijah, the man Naomi had first known. He walked through the small clinic entrance and saw her. She was sitting in the waiting area, hands resting gently on her stomach, her hair tied up, her face a little tired but glowing in the soft light. She looked up. Their eyes met. Time stopped. Naomi stood slowly, unsure if he would be angry, hurt, or disappointed. "I didn't want to disturb your life," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to raise our child in peace." Elijah stepped forward, his eyes never leaving hers. He reached out and placed both hands gently on her belly. "You're carrying our child?" he whispered. She nodded, and in one breath, one moment that held weeks of pain, hope, and silence, Elijah pulled her into his arms. He held her tightly, as if letting go would shatter him. "Thank you, Naomi," he whispered through tears. "You have no idea how long I've been searching for you." She closed her eyes, holding on. "I thought I lost everything," he continued, "but I just found everything." A few days later, Elijah took Naomi back to the Monroe estate, this time not as a visitor, not as a secret, but as the woman he had chosen, and the mother of his child. They entered the grand foyer, its chandeliers glittering overhead, walls lined with artwork and silence. Then Richard Monroe stepped forward, removing his cap. He looked at Naomi, directly into her eyes. "I need to say something," he said, voice steady. Naomi braced herself, but his next words made her breath catch. "I judged you," he said, "before I ever knew you. And I was wrong." She blinked in disbelief. "You gave our son what we couldn't," he continued. "Peace. And now, a family." Then Celeste appeared beside him. She didn't speak at first, just looked at Naomi. Then she nodded, too moved to say anything more. "Thank you," Richard added gently, "for loving him the way we never taught him to expect." Naomi looked at Elijah, then back at his parents, and simply whispered, "Thank you for seeing me now." Later that week, Naomi was sitting in the Monroe estate garden, sipping warm tea and watching the morning sun rise through the hedges. Her phone buzzed. It was a video call. From her family. Not just her mother. Not just Felicia. All of them. Her aunts, her uncles, her cousins. Each one waited their turn to speak, not with accusations, not with excuses, but with apologies, one by one. "We were wrong. We misjudged you. We looked down on you, and now we've learned a valuable lesson." Naomi's mother spoke last. Her voice cracked. "Thank you for loving the way we should have. Thank you for being stronger than we ever knew." Naomi blinked tears away. Elijah stood behind her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. He took the phone and spoke softly. "I forgive you. Because Naomi has always had a bigger heart than any of us." And in that moment, love stretched beyond rooms, past pride, across distance and misunderstanding, because Naomi had loved a man she thought had nothing, and now she had everything. By the end of that week, Elijah Monroe and Naomi Bennett's story had become more than just a viral moment. It became a movement, a symbol, a reminder that love, real love, could still exist in a world obsessed with image, wealth, and status. News outlets ran specials, blogs broke records, social media exploded with reels, edits, and hashtags. Naomi and Elijah, from nothing to everything. The teacher, who taught love people, didn't just admire Elijah for being a CEO anymore. They respected him as a man who gave up legacy for love, who chose kindness over connections, and who knelt before a woman the world had once mocked. Investors returned. Clients who once backed out came back stronger. Stock in Monroe Holdings doubled in just 5 days, because the world believed in him again. Not just as a businessman, but as someone who led with heart, and the one person who had never asked for anything became the reason his life was finally full. Meanwhile, back in a quiet part of the city, Marcus Cole sat alone on a plastic chair inside his cramped apartment. His phone buzzed repeatedly with news alerts. The man he had mocked. The man he tried to humiliate. The nobody, standing, in dusty slippers, was Elijah Monroe, CEO. Billionaire, Naomi's fiancé. Marcus had once bragged about being a supervisor at Monroe Holdings, but now, his fall came quietly. No press, no headlines, just a plain internal memo delivered to his desk. The next morning, an audit had uncovered everything: hidden funds, unauthorized bonuses, missing reports. He was terminated, disgraced. No farewell, no second chance. Elijah hadn't asked for it. He didn't even know. He was too busy, planning the next chapter of his life with Naomi. The sun poured softly over the Monroe estate gardens. The air smelled of fresh jasmine, rose petals, and something new. Peace. Naomi walked slowly across the grass, her hand resting over her small baby bump. Elijah stood near the fountain, smiling as he watched her approach. Their eyes met. And in that moment, it wasn't about company shares or headlines. It was just them. Two people who had once shared a meal, in the rain, and now shared a life. The wedding day arrived with gentle winds and a sky so clear it felt painted. A long red carpet ran down the estate aisle. White doves sat in golden cages ready to be released. World leaders, CEOs, old royals, childhood friends, street vendors, school children, all sat side by side, because today wasn't about status, it was about love. Naomi stepped into view, her white dress flowing like mist over water. Her hair was styled in soft curls, her veil glimmering. In her hands, a bouquet of white lilies. Simple, elegant, purely her. Gasps filled the air. Not because she looked like royalty, but because she looked like the truth. Felicia sat near the front, tears already on her cheeks. Naomi's mother clutched, a handkerchief to her heart. Even Celeste and Richard Monroe stood together, no longer judging, only proud. Naomi reached the altar where Elijah waited. He looked at her like it was the first time he had ever seen her. She smiled and whispered, "Hi," he whispered back. "You're breathtaking." The priest smiled and asked them to share their vows. Elijah took her hands in his, eyes glistening. "Naomi Bennett," he said, voice trembling. "When I met you, I had nothing. No name, no title, no expectations, and you didn't see a beggar. You saw a man. You gave me food when I was hungry, a dry cloth when I was soaked, and hope when I'd lost it. I promised to cherish, protect, and fight for you, every day for the rest of my life." Tears streamed down Naomi's cheeks. She took a breath, then spoke, her voice clear and strong. "Elijah Monroe, you walked into my life with tired eyes and humble hands. I didn't know your worth, but I knew your heart. You made me feel safe when I had nothing. You stood by me when no one else would. I promised to love you in rain and in bloom, in silence and in celebration. You are my peace, my partner, my home." Even the cameras went still. Even the doves waited. The priest smiled. "You may now kiss your bride." Elijah cupped her face and kissed her with all the love he had once hidden behind a hoodie and a broken heart. The doves flew. The sky lit up with fireworks. The crowd erupted. Felicia ran to her sister, hugging her tightly. "I'm so proud of you." Naomi's mother embraced Elijah, whispering, "Thank you for loving her." And Celeste Monroe stood just a few feet away, clapping through tears, humbled and healed. The wedding reception unfolded beneath a glass canopy strung with fairy lights. Guests danced, laughed, and lifted glasses to a love that had outshined wealth. Elijah and Naomi danced under the stars, hand in hand. The world watched, but faded into the background, because in that moment, nothing else mattered but them. Naomi Bennett was no longer just a schoolteacher, she was Elijah's wife, and together they were living proof that real love still wins, even when you start with nothing. Months passed. The world moved on to new trends and headlines, but one story quietly continued, not in front of cameras or on stages, but behind. The garden walls of the Monroe estate, where love was now lived rather than proved. Naomi Bennett Monroe was 7 months pregnant. She still woke up early, made her own breakfast, and visited her old sewing shop in Crescent Market once a week. It had been renovated by Elijah's team, modern machines, clean walls, better lighting, but Naomi insisted on still folding fabric herself. "Just because I married a CEO," she would joke, "doesn't mean I forgot how to hem a sleeve." Elijah would smile and stand quietly by the door, just watching her. The way she worked with purpose, the way she smiled with ease. She had become his anchor. He had become her shield. But not everyone accepted that. One afternoon, as Naomi stepped out of the clinic after her regular prenatal checkup, she was greeted by flashing cameras. Not fans, reporters. Paparazzi had caught wind of her location. "Mrs. Monroe, how does it feel being a billionaire's wife? Did you always know who Elijah really was? Is it true your baby will inherit Monroe Holdings? Do you feel qualified to raise a child in such a powerful family?" Naomi stood frozen. She hadn't expected this. She was in flats, wearing a cotton maternity dress, her hair wrapped, casually. No makeup, no security, no script. But before she could respond, a black SUV pulled up. The door swung open, Elijah stepped out, and the cameras turned. He didn't speak, just walked calmly to Naomi, placed his hand on her back, and guided her into the car. As they pulled away, Elijah took her hand. "I'm sorry," he said softly. Naomi looked at him. For what? For the world not knowing how to mind its own business. She smiled weakly. But inside, she knew the truth. The attention wasn't going to stop. And as her due date approached, the pressure mounted. 2 weeks later, Naomi went into labor. It was early, painful, unexpected. She was rushed to a private hospital wing Elijah had personally built and named after his late grandmother, someone he had always said taught him humility. The Clara Monroe Maternity Pavilion. The labor was long, exhausting. But in the early hours of the next morning, under soft white lights, Naomi gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Elijah cried before the child even opened his eyes. Naomi whispered through, "Tears welcome to the world, baby Zion." They named him Zion Elijah Monroe, a name that meant sanctuary and promise. It was perfect. Elijah held his son like he was holding the future. He kissed Naomi's forehead again and again. "You are my hero," he whispered. Naomi was exhausted, but smiling. "You're going to be a great father." Elijah shook his head. "I'm going to try every day to be the kind of man he can look up to." A nurse entered with a clipboard. "Do you want to share a press release for the birth, Mr. Monroe?" Elijah looked at Naomi. She shook her head slowly. "Let's keep this moment just for us," and he agreed. Back at the Monroe estate, celebrations were quiet, just family. Felicia arrived first, holding balloons and baby clothes. She cried when she held her nephew. "I'll never forget how wrong I was," she whispered to Naomi. "And how proud I am now." Naomi's mother came next, planting kisses on everyone, her face glowing. Even Celeste and Richard Monroe arrived, no longer stiff and distant, but warm and involved. Celeste held Zion gently, her eyes soft. "He has your strength," she said to Naomi. Richard simply nodded. "And your heart." The walls that once separated them had faded, not because of wealth, but because of one woman's quiet power. Naomi had never demanded respect. She had earned it. 3 weeks after the birth, Elijah received an invitation. Global Leadership Forum in Geneva. The panel, The Future of Legacy Leadership. At first he declined. He didn't want to leave Naomi and Zion. But Naomi nudged him gently one evening as they sat by the window. "Go," she said. "Tell the world what legacy really means." And so he went. But before he took the stage, he did something unexpected. He didn't bring a team of executives. He brought a slideshow. And the first image that appeared behind him wasn't of Monroe Holdings. It was a photo of Naomi sitting on a stool, smiling in her sewing shop, hands folded over her belly. He began his speech. "This is what legacy looks like, not shares, not buildings, not boardrooms, but choosing someone who makes you better, someone who sees you, not your title, someone who stays when you have nothing, and teaches you how to love when you forget how." The room went silent, and when he finished, they stood. Not for a CEO, but for a man who had chosen truth over appearances, love over power, Naomi over everyone else. The sun rose slowly over the Monroe estate, casting soft golden light over the garden where a new rhythm now played, baby giggles, lullabies, and the sweet hum of peace. Naomi sat beneath a blooming magnolia tree with baby Zion cradled in her arms. His eyes were closed, lips curled in a faint smile. His fingers wrapped tightly around hers, as if reminding her that even something so small could carry the weight of destiny. Elijah stepped outside, a cup of tea in one hand and a blanket in the other. He draped it around her shoulders and kissed the top of her head. "How's our little king?" he whispered. "Resting," she smiled. "Like he owns the whole estate?" "He does," Elijah said, sitting beside her. "He owns everything that matters." They both laughed quietly, because they knew it was true. This garden, this life, wasn't built with concrete or capital. It was built with truth. With every choice Elijah had made to walk away from what was easy and defend what was real. Naomi didn't return to her sewing shop right away, but every day she passed by it on her walks with Zion. One afternoon she unlocked the door. Inside were the same threads, the same scissors, but something had changed. It felt more like a symbol now, not just of work, but of where it all began. She placed her son on a cushion and picked up a half-finished wrapper she'd left folded weeks before labor. Her fingers moved with memory. Quick, practiced, certain. Elijah arrived a few minutes later and stood in the doorway watching. "You're back at it?" he asked. She looked up. "I never left, just paused." He smiled. "That's what strong women do. They pause. They never stop." Naomi chuckled. "Do you ever get tired of being poetic?" "Only when you stop giving me reasons to be." Across the world, their story had become folklore. Universities taught it in ethics classes. Non-profits cited it in campaigns. And Monroe Holdings, once known for its towering skyscrapers and multi-billion-dollar deals, had been rebranded under Elijah's vision, Monroe Human, a global initiative for entrepreneurship, education, and empathy. Every branch had a photo of Naomi and Elijah, taken on the day of their wedding, with the words inscribed beneath, "Seen," not for what they had, but who they were. In Willow Glen, Naomi's hometown, the community built a new school in her name. It was painted in pastel blues and sunflower yellows. Inside the foyer, a small plaque read, "Founded in honor of the girl who gave bread to a stranger and kindness, to a world that had forgotten it mattered." Felicia became one of the trustees. Naomi's mother volunteered to teach reading classes for women. Even Celeste Monroe donated supplies and appeared at the ribbon cutting, tears in her eyes. Hand in Naomi's, because now Naomi wasn't just her daughter-in-law, she was the woman who saved their family from itself. Years passed. Zion grew taller, smarter. He loved puzzles, animals, and asking impossible questions like, "Why does the moon follow us?" Every night Elijah told him bedtime stories. Not fairy tales, but the real story. The one where a man with too much wanted something simple, someone to see him, and found her in a storm, holding a plastic bag and an umbrella. Naomi would smile from the doorway, and sometimes, just before sleep, Zion would ask, "Mama, is it true you gave Daddy food when he had nothing?" And Naomi would nod. It's true, because sometimes people who look like they have nothing are the ones who have everything. One evening during a private family dinner, Camilla Hart raised a toast. "To Naomi," she said, lifting her glass, "for teaching all of us what legacy really means." Everyone stood, even the once skeptical guests, even the distant relatives, even the world. Because the girl who once gave away her only meal had given a billionaire his soul back. And in return, he gave her the world. Not the loud one, but the one that matters. As the night sky blanketed the estate, Elijah and Naomi sat on the same bench where they had once talked about starting over. Now they looked ahead. Zion asleep beside them, the stars twinkling above. "I still can't believe it," Naomi whispered. "All of it." Elijah took her hand. "You believed in me before anyone else did," he said. "That's why I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never forget your worth." She leaned into him, and in that silence, where no applause was needed, no headlines written, Naomi and Elijah held on to each other. No longer beggar and seamstress, but partners, parents, proof that no matter how noisy the world gets, real love always whispers the loudest.